Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Kathleen and today's video I'm going to be doing a wrap up for both of the month of May and June. During the month of May and June I went through a minor reading slump. Not necessarily a full slump where I didn't pick up any books. I definitely read a lot of good books, but I just didn't feel like reading, and definitely there were moments where I went weeks without reading a book. But I'm definitely have to say I think this month I'm out of that because it's only a week into July and I already read 2 books and I'm already halfway through my 3rd book, so I think I'm doing pretty good for the month of July. During the month of May and June I read a total of 8 books, 4 in May and 4 in June, so let's go ahead and get started with those books. So I'll go ahead and start with the books that I read in the month of May first. The first book that I read in the month of May was Reus by Cindy Pon. This is the sequel to Want, and Want is a dystopian with sci-fi element book. It's set in Taiwan and it's set in this world where pollution has become very, very bad to the point where people have to wear these suits in order to protect themselves from the effects of pollution because there is this huge gap between the rich and the poor in this world. The rich are able to live longer because they can afford to purchase these suits, and the poor then tend to end up dying a lot faster because a lot of them don't have the money to buy these suits, and our main characters are kind of trying to bridge that gap. I really enjoyed the first book. I thought it was really entertaining. I really enjoyed the characters. I gave the first book 4 stars. While I did find this book to be entertaining as well, I definitely did not quite enjoy it as much as the first book. I ended up giving this book 3.5 stars. I just felt like the story could have been wrapped up in that first book. I didn't think the second book brought anything to the table. I ended up thinking that this book was just unnecessary. And the second book that I read during the month of May, which by the way was the Asian readathon, so a lot of these books are to do with Asian authors or Asian characters. So the second book was Descendant of the Crane by Joan He, and I have to say this book is definitely the best book I've read so far this year. It definitely made its way into one of my favorite books of all time. I absolutely love this book. So it is set in China, I believe, because this is a Chinese fantasy, and it follows this girl. She's the daughter of the emperor and he dies, so she is now in line to take the throne, but she believes her father was assassinated. She doesn't believe that he just died from natural causes, so she sets out to investigate what happened to her dad because she strongly believes that her dad was murdered. This book just takes you on this roller coaster ride. You don't know who to trust, and I just loved every moment. I was always just turning the next page because I wanted to know what was going to happen next. I was exhilarated. I was gasping the whole time. I was like, what the heck is going on? If you go on my Goodreads and you look at my activities for this book, one of my updates was like, oh my god, what the heck is happening in this book, because that's how I felt. I just loved the emotions that this book brought. And the fact of the matter is that I don't know right about now, but about a month ago, Joan He, she wrote on her website and also on her Goodreads page that she was only contracted to write this book, so there is no sequel guaranteed for this book. She might be able to write a sequel if this book does well enough. And the fact is that while the ending of this book answered a lot of questions, it also left a lot open to interpretation, and I can't have that because this book is so good and it definitely needs a sequel. So if you guys are even a little bit interested in this book, please go out and buy it. I want to support Joan He so that she can write the sequel to this book because I so need the sequel. I gave this book 5 stars. I could give it 100 stars if I could. The next book that I read in the month of May is Wildcard by Marie Lu. This is the sequel to Warcross, which is a video game inspired book. It's very sci-fi. It's set in a world where technology has become so advanced. People wear these kind of like glasses, and you basically live in a virtual world, and it's a really good book. I really enjoyed it. It was very fast-paced and I quite enjoyed how the book ended. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I gave 4 stars to Warcross, I believe, as well. So, and the final book that I read during the month of May was Nexus by Sasha Alsberg and Lindsay Cummings. I read this for the Once Upon a Read Along book club, and I ended up giving this book 3 stars, which was actually quite a disappointment for me because I am one of the very few people who actually enjoyed Zenith. Zenith was so entertaining. I enjoyed every moment of it. Yes, it was not the most original idea. It's not one of the better YA sci-fi books set in outer space out there, but I enjoyed it. I thought it was entertaining. I thought it was fun. And honestly, when I read Zenith, I had very low expectations, so that might contribute to why why I enjoyed the book more than I expected. It wasn't quite as entertaining for me as Zenith was. I loved the gang, I loved the friendship in this book, but it just turned out to be not quite as fun as Zenith in my opinion, so that's why I gave this book 3 stars. Alright, so now moving on to the month of June, I again also read a total of 4 books, and this was the month that I decided I wanted to reread Sarah Dessen again. So in case you guys are new to my channel, you don't know, Sarah Dessen is actually my favorite YA contemporary author. Her books, every time she releases a new one, I always buy it, I always read it, and 99% of the time I always love it. So I wanted to reread her books. So the first book that I read during the month of June was Lock and Key by Sarah Dessen. So this is about a girl whose mother has issues basically, and they have a lot of money problems, and so one day her mother disappears and she manages to stay a few weeks by herself without nobody finding out. But because she's a minor, the neighbors alert the authorities and child services is called, and she is sent to live with her sister, who she believes abandoned them after she went off to college. So this is her story. I love this book so much. I love the main character. She goes through this growth that I just love. She goes from believing she can be independent, that she can live by herself, that she can take care of herself, to admitting that she does need help, that sometimes it's okay to ask for help, it's okay to rely on other people, and I just loved her growth. Of course, I gave this book 5 stars. And the next book that I read is also by Sarah Dessen, and that is Saint Anything. So this follows a girl, and she is the sister of this guy who's always been super popular. He's very charismatic, he's very good looking, and she's just kind of always been in his shadow. But her brother gets involved with the wrong crowd and he gets himself into a lot of trouble. It kind of adds up to where he ends up driving drunk one night and he hits this kid, and this kid is now paralyzed for life and he is sentenced to prison. This is her kind of dealing with that, but not only that, dealing with her parents who are now incredibly overprotective of her, and also dealing with the fact that her parents seem to think that her brother did nothing wrong. They bend backwards to protect him and to defend him, and she just wants her family to acknowledge of the fact that he made a mistake and that he is guilty of doing this thing. She's angry with her brother for doing what he did, but she's also angry with her parents for not acknowledging what he did. And I love this book so much. Of course, I gave this book 5 stars. And the next book that I read is also a Sarah Dessen book, and this book is her most recent release, and it is The Rest of the Story. So this is about a girl who she lost her mother when she was very, very little. Basically, she never went back to visit her mother's family. So she's always known her father and now her father's new wife and her father's family, but she never got to grow up knowing her mother's family. One summer she's supposed to go to her friend's house to spend the summer, but instead her friend cancels on her, so her father has no choice but to send her to her mother's family because there's no one else to take care of her. But I loved this story so much. It's all about family. I love Sarah Dessen books because she doesn't just focus on the romance, she focuses on other different aspects like friendship, and this one is really focusing on the family and getting to know your family. I just love the family dynamic in this book. It was so good. This book is definitely not my favorite Sarah Dessen book, but it's very much high up there, and so of course I gave this book 5 stars. And the final book that I read during the month of June, and the final book for this wrap up, is Aurora Rising by J. Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. Now, going into this book, I was a little bit hesitant, mostly because J. Kristoff and Amy Kaufman wrote one of my favorite series of all time, which is the Illuminae Files. So I kind of wanted to go into this series without having the expectation that it is going to be like the Illuminae Files, because one of the reasons why the Illuminae Files was so good was its writing format. It wasn't written like a traditional book like this one is. So I kind of had to get that mindset out of my head. I also started hearing a lot of mixed to negative reviews about this book because there were a lot of people disappointed. I went into this book very hesitantly. However, I ended up really enjoying this book. I actually ended up giving this book 4.5 stars. There were certain things that I didn't like about the book, and that's why I knocked 1/2 star. I felt like the snarkiness from some of the characters were a bit too much. It felt like the authors were trying to make these certain characters to be snarky, and it kind of crossed the line into being a little silly. But regardless, I loved the book. I was definitely not disappointed at all by this book. And there you go, guys. That is my wrap up for the month of May and June. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me know down in the comments below what was your favorite book that you read in the past 2 months, because I would really love to know. Mine was definitely Descendant of the Crane. If you haven't picked it up, please pick it up. I cannot say it enough. It was so good. Anyway, guys, thank y'all so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a like if you did, and subscribe to my channel if you're not already. All of my social medias are linked down below, including Twitter, Instagram, and Goodreads if you'd like to follow me on those platforms. I hope to see you guys on my next video. Have a good day, guys, and keep reading. Bye!